Well, we can finally say Happy New Year and good riddance to 2020 as we enter into 2021. Perfect time for the NHL season to get started. Well, things are still weird going into 2021, but I would say this year is all about recovering from 2020, both mentally and economically. But to get to the gist of some more NHL updates, on New Year's Eve, the 7 teams that didn't get to participate in the return to play plan actually did start hitting the ice for their respective training camps. And on January 3rd, everybody else will be good to start their training camps ahead of the 2020-21 56 game season that will begin on January 13th. And as a hockey fan, definitely am looking forward to that day, as I've been missing that during this time with COVID-19. However, a couple other tidbits that I will talk about that got a few more updates from the last couple of days that you have to wonder, will this apply for the whole season? But with the 14-day quarantine of the Quarantine Act, that if you travel from outside of Canada and come into Canada, that you have to quarantine for 14 days before you can go out and about. Well, the NHL, the government was granted exemption for the 14-day quarantine. They specified just training camp. So at least any players that are coming in to their respective teams in Canada will be exempt from the 14-day quarantine. That should make it a lot easier now for players to be coming in. I know that there'll be some internal testing that the players are going to have to go through, as well as staff and coaches and whatever, anyone associated with the team. However, what will be interesting is, will that be granted throughout the whole season? Because if you flash back to the major leagues, where the Toronto Blue Jays are the only Canadian-based team in Major League Baseball, they were granted approval upon the federal government, or I think it was the provincial government that was able to grant permission to have players all come in to Toronto for, get ready for the 2020 Major League Baseball season. But then the Feds rejected the Toronto Blue Jays to play their games in Toronto, more because of all teams flying in and out. So the easy solution was the Toronto Blue Jays to play in Buffalo, where their AAA team, and that's where the Toronto Blue Jays played their home games for that season. However, it's different with the NHL and the fact you have 7 Canadian teams, but they've already established that the divisions are temporarily realigned and that all Canadian teams are going to play against each other in the 7-game or 56-game season, with the 7 teams all in Canada only playing each other. You almost got to wonder, would the federal government grant that exception for the 14-day quarantine more for conducting business? Let's say, for example, as I kept saying in my other update videos, I had to wonder if, let's say, if a Canadian-based team needed to make a trade and it was with a US-based team, it wouldn't be fair for an asset to go right away to that team that you made a trade with, but then the player coming back up would have to wait 2 weeks before they actually get to play. And with April 12th, if I understand right, is the trade deadline for this upcoming season, that would really quash any trading, as well as what would be the point if someone wanted to waive to go up to Canada, knowing that they had to waive their right. Let's say there's no movement clause to go to Canada, knowing that they're not going to get to play for 2 weeks. That doesn't make sense, but I think that still would be the remain to be seen. But I think with this plan, with all Canadian teams playing against each other, could that go into effect for the whole regular season? Because the other element of this hockey returning is that February 5th is when the American Hockey League is still going to be coming back, which is the main feeder farm team for all NHL teams. But what still remains to be seen is that apparently there's only 4 Canadian-based teams in the American Hockey League, and apparently there was an initial proposal that they were only going to play each other all season, which not quite sure how that's going to work. I think it's still very preliminary how the AHL is going to do it. I know that the other gist of the American Hockey League is that they're more dependent on having actual fans in attendance. And then going back with the NHL updates, as I understand, is some markets that will allow fans in attendance on opening day. I understand that the Dallas Stars in Dallas, they're going to allow up to 5,000 fans in attendance. I heard that Arizona is going to allow fans in attendance. And then already in the state of Florida, both where the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning play, they're also going to have a limited capacity, obviously, of fans in attendance. I mean, already going back to, let's say, the Toronto Blue Jays, well, the Toronto Raptors, being that they're the only NBA team in Canada, they temporarily moved down into Tampa Bay, and they're playing at Molly Arena, where the Tampa Bay Lightning play. Well, even in Toronto Raptor home games, there are some fans in attendance at those games. So there's already some markets where it's going to have fans in attendance. I know it's a little trickier being it's an indoor small arena, because there are places in the National Football League where they allow fans in attendance, but it's a bigger outdoor stadium. And I know that many stadiums where they allow, where the full capacity is like 65,000, 70,000 fans, that I think at most they only allow like 10% of that as well, which that's what gets you interested about the Dallas Stars, where that's 25% of capacity, roughly, assuming 20,000 seat stadium with 5,000 fans, and that's indoors. I would still say during this whole pandemic, I know that things are definitely a lot tighter in Canada, because I don't think it's still going to be a few months before even some fans are allowed in attendance for all Canadian arenas, and hopefully maybe by April or May, by the plans for various jurisdictions where vaccinations are going to come, that more people are going to be vaccinated, that they can allow not a full capacity, but at least fans in attendance just in time for the playoffs. But yeah, it's getting back into that 14-day quarantine that I almost think that maybe with the plan that the NHL has in place, and the fact that the NHL had it was a bubble model, and it was a lot tighter, and then there was no COVID cases as well, that maybe the plan that they'll allow players to go up and down from the stage, for, let's say, recalls from the American Hockey League team, in addition to the taxi squad. I mean, you can have 4 to 6 players on the taxi squad, including carrying a goalie. You almost got to wonder what would happen if you have a lot of injuries and you exhaust that. And eventually, you might still want to call someone up from the farm, but hopefully at least that would be a little easier. That if at least they're granting the 14-day exemption for training camp, that maybe as the season goes on, and who knows, maybe by the time April 12th goes around, maybe the Canada-U.S. border, maybe it'll be less restricted or somewhat open. Keep in mind, it's been closed since March. I think the exact date was March 21st, because the 21st has always been the date where pretty much the can gets kicked down the road every month for the border to remain closed to non-essential travel. You can also maybe tuck around and say that this is a business trip too. These are professional athletes as well, and I know it's a touchy subject when it comes to talking about granting professional athletes, but this is still somewhat good for the economy to at least have professional sports going on again as well. Many sports fans like myself is need it for their mental health as well, just the way we're wired. But that's what I say about the NHL updates. At least we know that training camp is about to start, has started for the 7 teams that were not in the return to plan, and later this weekend, everyone else is going to start training camp. Pretty much you got 10 days or 11 days, depending on how your schedule works, from the start of training camp right until the puck drop on January 13th. Well, there was those 5 games that I talked about in previous videos, but most of the league will be actually starting on January 14th, including the Calgary Flames. And my plan is probably next weekend, once training camp gets going, and any storylines to develop from training camp, or who knows, if there was any transactions, I'll make a separate video, like a trade or big injury. But my plan for the following weekend is that I'll start Season 3 of my Calgary Flames game recaps. But since there will be no exhibition or preseason games, I think I'll just do an off-season catch-up video to get that season started, and then look ahead to the first 6 games of the 2020-21 regular season. As I know, the schedule has been made in terms of where each team's going to play, and I know that a couple of weeks ago, NHL was granted approval for NHL teams to play in their home arenas, so at least we know what date games will happen and where. It's still a matter of when. Is it going to be, this time or that time? I think the league is still figuring it out, especially with some temporarily realigned divisions. And I think my understanding, especially with the temporary realigned West Division, now that you got teams like St. Louis and Minnesota in that division, where they're going to be playing California teams very regularly, that they're in the Central Time Zone playing in the Pacific Time Zone. I hear that they might make concessions for those teams, that those games will start a little earlier for those teams playing in California. If there's no fans in attendance to begin with, it's almost irrelevant when games are going to start, but it's going to be a nice packed schedule where, as I say, I'm excited for the All-Canadian division. All Canadian teams playing each other, and just to limit the travel and just the potential, you always got to say potential spread of the virus, that if they condense it so that you play, teams 3 times in a row, kind of like you do in baseball, it's going to be even more interesting to see what happens, and new rivalries will be born. So that's all my various NHL updates as we go into 2021. That training camps begin, at least for training camp. The federal government has granted exception for the 14-day quarantine, but I have a feeling that maybe, just in this case, that there's more Canadian teams, that they might grant it a little more, knowing that the Canadian teams are going to play each other all season. And I'm just talking about, let's say, calling someone up from the AHL team or making a trade, because it would definitely give the Canadian teams a big disadvantage about making a trade, especially on trade deadline day. Given how tight this league season's going to be, some teams are going to think we're going to want that extra piece to bring it in. So, to close it out, just say, if you want to follow this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, but I also do a variety of content, like I do personal blogs, attempt at comedy, and I also do share my experiences with them on the road or our sporting event. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you need to do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. And now here we are in 2021. I'm a little optimistic that I'm asking for 2021 to be a little better than 2020, and I'm just looking at this year to be more of a recovery year, just to recover from it, as I mentioned, mentally and financially. Not expecting extra glamorous things, but I still want to continue to keep making content on my YouTube channel, and hopefully continue to keep growing on this platform. And it might be nice if maybe in 2021 I hit those 2 magical thresholds to turn on the monetization button. But I gotta keep making the content, and also I'm gonna close out and say, go Flames go, and I'll see you in the next video.